I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, and I am so delighted to be joined with some of the best composers working in film and television today. Welcome Lili Haydn and Ben Bromfield, nominated for their song Marriage is a Dungeon from Ginny and Georgia. We've got Ariel Marx, nominated for music composition for her score for A Small Light. Leo Birenberg and Zach Robinson, nominated for their score for Weird, the Yankovic Story. And I'm so glad that you're all here. Let's get straight into it, everybody. Now, my first question is going to be for Ariel, and I want to know this. A film or series is most effective and potent as an art form when it makes us feel something. And a lot of that, it rests on the shoulders of the composer. Joy, sadness, fear, and especially for some of your tracks, trepidation and peril. So what is your number one priority when writing music that will elicit a strong emotional response from the audience?
Number one priority. Well, it's so hard, and we all are tasked with this kind of impossible balance between it has to be good enough to be effective, but not too big or outrageous that we notice, people notice it in a way that they don't want to. But sometimes we want to be noticed, and the music does, like in the diner fight scene you were talking about, like music sounds like it was a centerpiece. I haven't seen it yet. I promise I will. And I think it's just like, for me, the most important thing is scale. Like I may want to use 100 musicians, but if that overwhelms the story and the tone of the story, I'm not going to do that. Like making sure that and that's what I did with A Small Light. Like you want to make sure that the palette and the instrumentation is authentically matching and mirroring the story, and not trying to fit into what you think it should be or what someone else would do it like. But yeah, just being like very, very aware of what the show already is.
It's interesting. Who else has got some comments about how do you bring the emotion?
You hang on every breath of your main character. I was lucky enough to work with Hans Zimmer for a while as part of his team, and I asked him, what's the one nugget you would give me if what could you teach me? And he said, fall in love with your star, which basically just like, how do you make your star shine? And so everything that I do is, basically it's complete allegiance and devotion to making that person, to being really like the emanation of that person's thoughts and emotion and all of that. And of course, you've got to pay attention to scale. Absolutely. Good observation. I love that insight.
Yes, it's good. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I think I actually really like Hans's / Lili's way of putting it, because connecting with the characters is like one of the most important things that you can bring to this type of thing. I think when you're in the process of doing this type of work, you have to have a personal connection with them and their experiences in order to put yourself into that place where you can make the audience then feel that way. And that can be really difficult. I'm sure Ariel has a lot to say about that, because when you're working on something that's really emotionally heavy, like that can really like take a lot out of you. And so but that's part of what we're doing here, and that's this type of sacrifice that we have to make on a micro scale, putting yourself in the shoes of the character and in the shoes of the audience. It's sort of this mix between emotional and analytical for me. And so yeah, I like that way of putting it. And then my really short, boring answer is harmony. Chords. I'm such a nut when it comes to that. I mean, I just love the way when I give myself the warm fuzzies when I'm doing this work and it's late at night and it's dark in my room or whatever, and playing just some like chords that are just feel really emotionally resonant with what I'm working on. That really is some of the most affecting work for me. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I hear you. Like Leo, I wish I could explain how certain harmonies, certain melodies, certain notes affect me so emotionally and viscerally. They just do. So how do you bring that emotion when you're scoring a film like Weird?
Well, I kind of, well, first of all, I want to say I like that. I like when Hans Zimmer transcends his corporal form to become like film score Buddha and has like these choice quotes that guide us all, because like, it's really his best form.
Mhm.
I I obviously agree with that same line of thought, but I often, when I'm approaching something like a really emotional scene, will try to just pretend I'm not working on the film and I'm just the audience. And I just kind of sit there, like with my hands on the keyboard, like watching it. And I just kind of like press out almost like the phrasing that feels emotional, even if like the notes aren't there yet, even if it's just the same chord, like, because to me, like, there's so much that you can get out of like perfectly structuring the scene so that like when that moment of gravitas hits, it's in the exact perfect spot and not like a second earlier and a second late. And so like it's almost easier to kind of like take all the music out of the equation and just kind of like feel the scene with like dummy notes, and then kind of see that there's a structure there, or at least have identified that like, oh, I'm the audience and like that's the line that's going to make me cry, which is why I like played this chord here. Let me go back and land there and figure out how to structure the whole thing around that.
Wow. I
Yeah.
love that. Final thoughts to you, Zach, on the emotion.
Well, everyone really covered all the bases, but I'll add that I think, you know, as composers, we're all manipulators, and that's kind of why we're hired. We're hired to manipulate, and that's kind of why we love to do it, because we really like making audiences feel a certain way, and I think what is special in our job, and I think what kind of separates us from people who write music, like just not to picture, is I think like we need the ability to kind of spot the music. Like we have to decide. Leo's talking about, you know, this chord makes me cry here, but that the here is actually the most important part. Like where you shuffle music and where you land is really like I think the hardest part of our job, and it's also the part where really like our expertise gets to shine. And I think I have the most fun doing that, and I just kind of go by like what gets me the most jacked up. Like if I'm watching something, like what gets me the most excited, whether it's someone delivers a line where I know in my heart like you gotta come in really hard with the music right after that. I'm thinking about in the Weird Al movie, like we have a trumpet solo come in on the dad showing the Hawaiian shirt for the first time to Al, and it's just like it hits this note literally. But I mean that's where I think like as composers we just have the most fun. It's like spotting the music.
I like thinking about it as manipulative. I sometimes think of it like that too, especially when you're working on comedy, because on comedy you've got all this opportunity for misdirection, especially with Weird, where like you guys are like the comedy comes from the juxtaposition of the subject matter and the seriousness, both for you guys and with a lot of the acting performances. And so I just think it's really fun. And also, like, you know, in mysteries, music can really manipulate the audience into thinking a certain outcome is going to happen and then it doesn't. And so I think that that's kind of like a fun sort of cheeky way to refer to it as like, you know, we're here making people feel things in a very deliberate way. And I think that might be why people are so fascinated by this process, because it can change the same thing. Like you'll see these videos going viral of a trailer recut, you know, the Shining trailer recut as a rom-com, and it's because of that music that it really.
It's Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel. That's the famous recut, and it's a great track, and it works amazing over every single thing. Exactly.
It really does. I love that. I watched it. Hey, go for it. Go for it.
No, it's also crazy how
sorry.
little, like we hold such an atomic weapon, not to make an Oppenheimer, but we do in terms of the slightest shift in like a voicing or a harmony move that will make such an emotional impact that like I am always surprised every single project I work on, what like it's down to the minutia of what makes something either too melodramatic or just poignant enough, or just kind of, in the pocket of the tone of the show or just a little bit outside of it. And so it's like, it's these little things that change the picture so much.
If I were a director, I have so much compassion for directors who spend, years on projects, and then they have to hand it over to a person who can completely change the vibe and make or break it, with their sensitivity. So I would be scared shitless, pardon my language, if I were a director that's why it's so great to have a relationship. I love having directors at my house, at my studio, to like, you turn the knob, because then you'll have a sense of like, let's get you involved. That was one of the things that was hardest on Ginny and Georgia, was we were doing it in the pandemic, and we didn't have that tactile, like it took a while to actually dial in the technical ability to get that relationship where we could dial in the nuances with the creatives.
Yeah. This talking about manipulating the audience. Manipulate sometimes has a negative connotation. I don't see it that way. It's like a shepherding. This is why I am so in love with film and TV and music, always have been. And I always love talking to composers, because I just feel like you all do something very, very unique that us fans really, really love and appreciate. And it's why I listen to film and TV music all the time. So interestingly, speaking of film score Buddha, I was watching a TikTok the other day, many TikToks actually, where people play the Interstellar theme on a piano. And it reminded me how much that score means to me. Cornfield Chase, particular, that track. It's just so special. There's so many scores that I love. I'm wondering, given that you all work in this industry day in, day out, and you're so passionate about your work, what film or TV scores or composers are you most fond of, and why? Let's talk about our love for the craft. I know you probably don't listen to many because you're in your own space, but surely there's something from the past that you love. Who wants to go first?
The score that made me fall in love with film music was Cinema Paradiso. And I am in no way like an Ennio Morricone prodigy in terms of how, like, even my style and how I write, but that was the first movie that opened my eyes to how, like, I don't care. I hear that music and I immediately feel overwhelmed, and like I heard it for the first time. So that was I think that made me fall in love with how unbridledly romantic it is. And I can remember it. You can pick it. I haven't watched it for however many years, and I can still think of it.
Yeah,
I love Ennio Morricone's The Mission. The Mission.
Yes.
Just, I had a playlist of music that I would put on if I thought I might be making out with somebody.
And that was on it.
Very dramatic. I just scared a lot of people away with it.
I must remember that. Yeah.
It weeds out the lesser options.
If they're not into it, just kick them to the curb. That makes so much sense to me. So much sense.
Funny man, yeah. I'll say Thomas Newman, Shawshank Redemption. He has like an earnestness to the way he approaches drama that I think has always resonated with me. The way he writes for strings, I absolutely love. String orchestra. And the way that he finds a way of I don't know, he you know what it is, he has the most he has such a voice, and another person is John Bryan, another film composer I really like, also really distinct voice. Like you just know it's these guys when it's these guys. And finally, I'll say John Powell, who I've really come to love as like he's kind of my favorite like big studio film composer. I just really like the harmonic language, again with the harmony stuff he goes toward, and the way that he turns some of these his score for Chicken Run randomly is incredible.
Like, I love the score to Rio. The Rio one by John Powell is like unbelievable. Like it's all written around this, like it almost sounds like a nice English chorale, the main melody, but it's like it's absolutely killer.
Like he's just, don't sleep on John Powell is all I'll say as far as these big.
I mean, Face Off. Come on, 1995, Face Off.
Yeah,
The John Woo stuff. I feel like, I mean, Ennio Morricone, like whatever, everyone, like I love him dearly. He is my father that I never had, or never met, and didn't know I existed. But I love him so much, and I mean, Fistful of Dollars got me into music in general. But I also feel like, I mean, like I grew up playing a lot of video games, and like the music of Koji Kondo and Zelda and all that stuff, like really, yeah. And Nobuo Uematsu, who did Final Fantasies, like all kind of the sense of melody in those scores is, I think, unparalleled. Something you actually don't even hear in film music, because it's just so purely, it's just music, and it happens to be to a video game picture. But I love that stuff.
Wow. What about you, Leo?
I'm a huge nerd, specifically of the Tolkien variety with my dragon tattoo. So I love Howard Shore's score to Lord of the Rings. Huge formative moment for me, just like watching movies. I think I saw Fellowship of the Ring 8 times in theaters as like a 11-year-old or 12-year-old or whatever I was. So that's a huge one. I love specifically Catch Me If You Can, because I am a saxophone player and I just really enjoy, like I often enjoy scores where I feel like there's almost like a concerto element to it, where there's like, it's not just about the screen. It's like, you can tell that the music was written to be performed by like living humans that are playing it. And so like the way that the saxophone and the vibraphone and the bass especially are used in that score, I just thought was like so interesting, within the John Williams canon, as such, just an awesome example of like musicianship.
Yeah, man. I love all of those. And you know what, by the way, John Powell was nominated this year for the Michael J. Fox documentary film. So when you eventually get onto the red carpet and he's there, you should go up and tell him how much you love Chicken Run and all of his other, and How to Train Your Dragon and all those amazing scores he did. And I totally agree about all of those, particularly Ennio Morricone. I mean, his score for Milena is one of my favorites of all time. It's just, thank you so much for all those suggestions. I'm going to go listen to them later today. Everybody, thank you very much for your time on this group chat. It's been such a pleasure having you. I'm really happy for all of you being nominated. And we will, I guess, see you on the red carpet at some point soon. And congratulations once again.
Thanks so much for having
Thank
us.
you.
Bye, everyone.